Welcome back. This is Mark Divine and the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to explore what it means to be fearless through the lens of the world's most inspirational, compassionate, and resilient leaders here on the Mark Divine Show. Guests include notable folks from all walks of life, including mental toughness experts, mental health experts, Stoic philosophers, a whole bunch of folks you can see from our guest list. We're really, really interesting people doing amazing things and being unbeatable in the world. Today, I'm trying a new format. So my good friend, Unbeatable Mind Super Coach and SEAL Fit trained athlete, Melanie Sliwka, is here. If you've been following Unbeatable Mind or SEAL Fit, then you definitely know Melanie. She's a nutrition expert. She's a mental health expert. She's a super fit mom and an unbelievable person. And so what we're going to try going forward is have Melanie join me when we do independent, non-guest podcasts so that we can have conversations. And we'd love to have you provide us topics and ideas that you want to have conversations. They can be just Q&A stuff or like, hey, I want you to do a podcast on this or that. And Melanie and I will do some research and then we're going to present our ideas, and Melanie will try to probe and plumb the depths of my consciousness to see what comes out. And I love these spontaneous type of podcasts because some really interesting things come out, and I think we can help a lot of people with this format. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Melanie, to the show.
You.
I'm super stoked to have you. And I'm considering you also as a co-host. I would love to have a co-host to bring some female energy into the Mark Divine Show, so we'll work on that. And also looking at bringing some activity into the Mark Divine Show as we move our location and change things up in the next 6 months or so, and maybe having guests come to us and putting them through a little integrated training, breath work, some, push-ups. Maybe some plank holds, a little sauna, cold plunge work, hyperbaric chamber, who knows? Yeah. And then see what comes out through the conversation afterwards. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Very cool.
So stand by for a lot of changes there.
100%. At
any rate, what's top of mind this week, and our topic for this week is mental health. So there's no mystery that mental health has suddenly become a major issue for culture, for our society, for vets, for kids, for people who are really still reeling from the effects of COVID. I don't really have all the stats in my mind. Maybe you do, Mel, but mental health is a real issue. So where should we start? Because it's such a broad topic.
Well, I think we'll start from where it's close to home.
Yeah.
Carry the load.
Yeah, so let's start there.
Yeah.
My buddy, I met him at SEAL Team 3. I actually recruited him to be my platoon chief in the 3rd platoon, right? He was a BUDS instructor. So, and his reputation was like stellar.
Yeah.
That reputation is everything for SEALs. That's our currency. And he was he had the $1 million reputation. And so I wanted him as my platoon chief. We had a great relationship. And so, because he had formerly been at SEAL Team 3 before he went to BUDS. So he came back and became my platoon chief. And we had developed a great relationship. Later on, he became master chief in charge of all training at BUDS, and then ran the instructor training to teach and train new instructors. Did that after he retired as a civilian even. Until about 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then he retired entirely from that. So he was a Navy SEAL from 17 or whatever. He joined the Navy in about 17, and he was a SEAL shortly after until mid-50s.
Really interesting that he was head of all of BUDS, the chief of BUDS, because he always had that safety essence about him. He was always looking out
for others.
Yeah, for our cadre, for our campers, trying to have the best route for whatever we were doing and the safest route for everyone. He's always had everyone's best
Mel's referring to, so he also, because we were good friends, I asked to come help us out and be a coach for SEAL Fit. So he's one of our top Navy SEAL coaches at our events, and also coached our boat cruises at Unbeatable Mind, and just everyone absolutely loved it. And so why are we talking about? Well, if you haven't heard, he committed suicide several weeks ago, out of the blue, completely shocked everybody. When my friend Gene Pluso, who is a retired SEAL captain, called me, he was my platoon commander. The platoon right before I took over and asked Mark to join me, Gene and I have stayed in close touch, and he called me and literally told me this, and I was in stunned silence. I said, Gene, it's not easy to surprise me. But when he told me that I had committed suicide, I was like, wow. And it caused me, like I pushed a pause button on my life and said, wow.
Right.
If it can happen to, who else could it happen to? I even had to ask myself, do I have any those tendencies?
We all did. Yeah.
And, fortunately, the answer was no. There's not a bone in my body that wants to off myself, but it's a pretty big issue. And it's not just among vets, but we can start there with vets.
Yeah.
It's not alone.
Well, the
Obviously,
majority
in the
of
vet community.
55 and older vets are those that can actually commit suicide.
That's really sad. I've heard the stat, and most people have heard that 22 vets a day, on average, commit suicide. So you're saying most of those are 50 or older.
That's right.
A lot of those are still from kind of Vietnam era, but those guys are getting older. Mm-hmm. So was and like myself, we were Iraqi freedom, not Iraqi freedom. We were Desert Storm era.
Desert Storm.
Yeah, we were Desert
That's my
Storm
Iraqi.
era, and then Iraqi, and did a lot of combat tours. He had a lot more combat experience. Most of the younger SEALs have a lot more combat experience than I had, and so they dealt with a lot of that stress. But seemed to have it all squared away, right? And so on the outside, and he was into service, which is one of the things. Like if you have a purpose, like he seemed like he was into service. He loved helping people. It appeared as he had a purpose, but that could have been one of the issues, right? And I think that what we've noted in our work with the Courage Foundation with vets is that when the military members leave service and they have this intense sense of like knowing exactly why they're putting their pants on every day when they're in the military, and suddenly they don't when they get out in the civilian world. And that's one of the biggest issues they have. They have this kind of existential feeling of like, why am I here if I'm not useful anymore?
And then their purpose is related to their mortality, is what I keep thinking about. It's like most people will have a purpose. They're accountants, they're doctors. A soldier puts their life on the line for their purpose.
That's true.
What more committed purpose could there possibly be? That's what keeps clicking in my head, is how is that related to this rate of suicide?
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I've thought a lot about in context of, and I think other vets who are listening would kind of back me up on this, is that military operators who consider themselves warriors, and you and I have had this conversation, Mel, not all are warriors, right? Some do it for the GI Bill, some do it just for the job, to get out of the inner city, and all those are valid reasons. But then there's others like special operators who are like, they got plenty of things to do in their life that they could be doing. Like I was a CPA. I could have stayed and earned a ton of money.
That's right.
But I was a warrior, and so I went and became a Navy SEAL as a warrior. So a lot of warriors have this feeling like, kind of to your point, I'm willing to die.
Yeah.
And like Michael Mansour, Navy SEAL, won the Medal of Honor. Like he jumped on a grenade to save his teammates, and he's honored, right? And he went out well. And so warriors have this sense that they want to go out well. They want to go out, running toward the sound of gunfire, saving their teammates, serving and protecting the country from evil people. And suddenly when they leave that all behind and their body starts to go into, this older years, and they start to have issues,
right,
physical or mental, some of them think, well, shit, this isn't what I'm here for, right? I should have gone out in a blaze of glory. I think because I remember him, and sometimes you hear it joking, right, Lee? I've heard this and I heard it from others, jokingly. Yeah, if I ever am like that, just take me out to the pasture and shoot me. Or, I think I've even said stuff like that before. So you got to be really careful what your internal dialogue is.
100%.
You know what I mean? And so I think, God bless him, might have had some physical or mental news that he just said, you know what? This is not how a warrior's supposed to go out. But that's really flawed thinking, because it doesn't take into account family and teammates, and it's kind of a selfish act in my opinion.
And then you combine, some kind of a TBI,
right. Not thinking clearly from TBI.
Yep. And the aging process. And
so let's shift focus. We don't want to make this about, God bless him, I love him. I hope he's in a better place, and I don't judge him. I don't judge anyone who does this. It's torture, right? And so
it's torture for us here too.
Kids,
yeah, it's torture.
Teens, adults, anybody who's suffering from the stress of either combat or any kind of trauma COVID-related trauma, death of a loved one, and it's very easy to get into this rut where you start thinking it's not worth it. And so what's your sense, Mel? Like, how do we get out of that rut? What's the first thing we should do? Besides listen to the Mark Divine show,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, Unbeatable Mind would be a great place to start, just saying.
Right, no kidding.
I mean, it really is. I think it really is that brain shift of positivity and starting to shift. You know, you posted something today, right, about being a pessimist as opposed to an optimist. And
Right.
so, you know, that starts right now, right here, every day for all of us.
Yeah, how you manage your own internal dialogue and your thinking process. But it has to be taught, and sometimes if you haven't been taught that and you're in a rut, to me, what you need to do is reach out to someone who's positive that you can trust. And so to develop, and maybe like a strategy is to think about that right now. Like, who is your fallback person? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know I could turn to my wife, Sandy. I could turn to you. I could turn to a couple other people that I'm close with if I was struggling, and I'd be like, help me think more clearly. That's all you need. Help me think more clearly, because what I'm thinking right now is dark. And could have called me, or any vet could call me, and I'll help them through, right? So who's your go-to swim buddy
Yeah.
when shit gets really bad? So think about that, right? As you're listening to this, who's your swim buddy that if shit gets bad, it doesn't have to be like thoughts about death, just dark thoughts, depressing thoughts, or if you just feel like in a rut. Everybody needs a swim buddy.
Yeah.
And that swim buddy is just going to be a passive a listener and someone who says, you know what, that's not healthy thinking. Here's what I would be saying to myself, or have you considered this, right? You know, because it's really hard for us to see the positive sides of us. We tend to obsess about the things that are messed up, right? Especially kids.
That's another powerful tool is timelining. You know, if you can create some space in your mind in that dark place where you just take a look back and you say, take a breath.
And pause, breathe, think, and
Pause,
act.
breathe,
Let's
think, and
apply
act.
that to mental toughness right now. So I love that, Mel. So instead of just shedding light on it, because we know, and I want to talk about mental health with teens because I think it's a big issue too, but certainly know more about vets. Issue number one for vets is there's several of them. One is to get your physiology out of a state of hyperarousal. And that can even precede sometimes, like it did for me, it can precede military service. Like because I grew up in a traumatic family, I was already in a state of hyperarousal. Fortunately, I started breathing and meditating when I was 21, so it helped bleed a lot of that off, helped me succeed, but a lot of people don't have that. So then they get in the military and they stay jacked up. And then they retire or get out, and their body's in hyperarousal. What does that do? You're a nutritionist. What does that do when you're constantly in fight or flight?
Well, you know, your body is in a state of inflammation. Your
That's right.
nervous system is jacked. I mean,
And
your
inflammation
entire
in the brain leads to challenges, right?
It leads to challenges. It leads to physical challenges. It leads to digestive problems. I mean, you
Right.
name it. Your heart. They say that, you know, a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, or like a concussion, right? Or having a heart attack. What if you did scans of your heart and your brain? Looks the exact same as PTSD.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
only a short amount of time with the PTSD if you can sort it out, right? And so this is fact. Your body, from emotional trauma, reacts physically.
It does.
Period.
That's right. Period. So the trauma doesn't discriminate. It doesn't, just because if you weren't in the military and not dealing with combat stress to me exacerbates underlying trauma that already existed in a lot of people. And I've had that discussion with quite a few SEALs who recognize that those who have post-traumatic stress, the symptoms often have a trauma that precedes their military service. And they didn't develop the tools to deal with it, such as breath training. Right?
Right.
And they stay hyper-aroused, and then their hormones get all out of balance because their cortisol is jacked
Hormones,
up, and
yep.
which means their sleep is out of
Sleep,
whack,
yep.
and so they're not getting the recovery. Good sleep is where the inflammation gets healed.
That's right.
in
And the
brain.
hormones get
And
created.
the hormones get the positive hormones get created and the negative effect of the adrenaline, epinephrine get bled off and rebalanced. So
Insulin,
everything gets rebalanced,
everything,
right?
at night.
And if you're not sleeping because you're jacked up in hyperarousal, then you have this persistent state of dis-ease, out of balance, and it just builds and builds and builds until you literally will hit a breaking point. Mm-hmm. And that will show up differently for different people. Some will be psychosomatic, others it'll be just like some physical illness manifesting, or just serious like depression without understanding why. It's because your hormones are all out of whack.
You're in a state
You're
of...
not producing dopamine and endorphins anymore.
No.
Growing up in abusive families does the same thing, because you're constantly under this stress, and it shuts down your ability to produce dopamine and endorphins. So you use alcohol to or drugs to...
Makes all sense.
To stimulate, to feel
Yeah,
normal.
that's it. And then when you prescribe drugs, by the way, the rate of suicide among those who are taking SSRIs or something
Much higher, yeah.
Yeah, when they take those, it's 2 to 1.
Really?
In a 2005 study. Yeah, 2 to 1.
Committing suicide if you're on an SSRI
compared to
versus
those
not.
who are using other means, non-pharmaceutical means.
Yeah, I think
It's
those
huge.
in the VA, that's the go-to for the VA, although they're getting a little wiser these days.
They are. They're doing a lot better.
It should always
I'll
be a
say.
short-term solution.
Always. Yeah, and they're doing a lot better. I mean, this was a 2005 study, but still it just shows the abuse, and I just keep seeing these ads on TV, like, you don't need a doctor anymore, just join this website and we'll get you your
That's such
antidepressants.
bullshit, yeah.
I'm like, oh, Lord.
So getting your body back into balance through breath training, proper nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Like, those are the big four of the physiological rebalancing, right?
And arousal control,
and
yeah.
it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Simply breathing and slowing down your breathing through your nose and turning it into a daily practice, 20 minutes every morning, what we call box breathing. Inhale, 5 count, hold your breath for 5 count, exhale, 5 count, hold your breath. That is basically the anti-stress medicine, and it's free.
It's free. Works 100%.
That will start to balance your body and mind and lead to better decisions about what you eat. Now you're going to start to feel better, and then you can take an active approach to eating, and simply eating closer to the earth, right? Eating less barcoded junk food, cut out the sugar. Your cleaner eating program is brilliant because each week you just cut out something bad,
little
right?
something.
Yeah.
Well, also social media, though, Mark. I mean, this is also a way of completely wasting time. And, we're doing a podcast, but,
Well, podcast
we have to be really
that's
careful.
learning and growth.
It
Social
is.
media, technology can be positive or negative. So the negative side of social media is the perfectionism and the comparison, especially among young kids. That's really happened, and also the negativity, right? And so a lot of negativity and comparison going on, and then the news also. So if you plug into any sort of TV, right?
Oh God, yeah.
TV shows are super violent. They're just going to exacerbate the depressed mind.
Yeah.
Negative network news. Turn that crap off. Stop watching news, right? Your mom or stepmom or mother-in-law, I should say, will tell you anything you need to know about what's going on in Ukraine, right?
Exactly. And imagine like comparing yourself to what's happening on the news. Like the news is bad. The news tells you bad things. And then you look at your own life and you're like, well, I haven't got off the couch in a few days, but I'm doing good compared to those people. Yeah,
That's right. So balancing the physiological then leads to psychological space and a little bit of ability to create better opportunity for better decisions. So that's the pausing and the breathing. And then you get to think. So PBTA, remember this acronym: pause, breathe, think, act. Pause in your life and pause every day by breathing through your nostrils and slowing it down. And that massages your vagus nerve, which literally massages your whole being, because it's kind of getting you into that warm blanket of, stress release. The parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, that rest and digest. Everything's coming back into balance. And then think, okay, what can I eat well and good today? What's going to, a good smoothie instead of, whatever greasy burrito, right?
Yeah.
And then
Even a protein
for lunch,
drink.
a good, chicken salad, right?
Something big.
Just
something
learn to
good.
eat that until your body just rewards you with a high five, and then you crave the healthy stuff. It's just, you just have to learn to love it, right? Stay away from all the junk food.
Stay away from the sugar.
And you shouldn't be drinking any sugary drinks. It blows me away when I still see adults drinking Coca-Cola. Even
Monsters.
they think Diet Coke is like really, oh, this is better for me. I'm like, no,
Oh God, no.
it's poison.
It's poison.
You should drink water or sparkling water. Or,
Do I have to remember, like, when people
there's
do
some
those?
great options these days.
Yeah, and I mean the sparkling water is amazing. I live off that stuff. I love
I
it.
do too.
But
Yeah.
even the diet drinks, they still create that same pleasure center that sugar does in your brain, even if there's no calories associated with that. So your body still, your brain still wants sugar.
That's
So
right.
if you think you're doing yourself a service with the diets and the
no.
fake sugars,
And there's other
not.
stuff in there which is not good.
yeah.
It's not good. So cut out all that junk. Then guess what? You're not going to be as jacked up. You're already introducing hormones through the breath practice and eating well that'll then rebalance the cortisol, so you'll start to sleep better.
Right.
You can take classic sleep hygiene things into consideration for sure, but the most important thing is to stop eating sugar and stop drinking caffeine in the afternoon and stop drinking alcohol 2 hours before bed.
At least.
And guess what? You're going to sleep like a baby within a week.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated. It's all about habits, right? So you get that taken care of. Find yourself a swim buddy to help you think better, and that means you bounce things off of that swim buddy, right? If you're thinking dark thoughts, bounce them off your swim buddy. And if that swim buddy is cementing and fomenting those dark thoughts, get yourself a new swim buddy, because you want someone who's going to hold a mirror up and say, dude, you're not thinking clearly, right?
Yeah, and a therapist, someone that you can dial up. We all need the therapy.
Yeah. I've had a sponsor called BetterHelp for this podcast, and I really believe in therapy. I've been doing therapy since I was probably 31 when I first met Sandy when I left Buds.
Wasn't she your
When I
therapist?
got out of Buds. She's a therapist, right? So actually, I started therapy when I was 27, I think. So it's been a long time. 27, 37, 47, it's like 30 years I've been doing therapy. Now, it hasn't been every single week, but it's definitely been at least minimum once a month. And it's
Yeah,
been
that's
really
great.
valuable. And then I learned through therapy all these other techniques like EMDR, which is very, very helpful for dealing with post-traumatic stress.
That brings me to the question. Do you feel that combat vets should have mandatory psychiatric counseling
Oh,
upon
for
the return?
sure. And now, I know in Naval Special Warfare, they have the Human Performance Program. They have psychologists now who go and forward deploy, and they'll go to the forward staging areas, not into like the FOBs where the SEALs are operating, obviously on the combat lines, but and you have the option to go see them. But I agree with you. I think it should be, you rotate through and you talk to the therapist.
Group counseling,
Either
something.
in a group, they come and talk to your platoon, or you talk to them individually. We've got to dispel, this illusion that you have to be broken to talk to a therapist. It's completely false. It'd be like saying, Mark, you're screwed up because you talk to a therapist. I'm not screwed up. I actually am thriving.
Yeah.
But I consider it extraordinarily valuable to have a therapist hold a mirror up to my thinking. And to
100%.
validate my thinking. And sometimes I realize, wow, I'm going down a freaking rabbit hole with that one. And the therapist can haul you back out or help you haul yourself back out. Now, if you can't afford it and you don't think you have the time or you just don't know where to start, then go to one of these new models that provide online therapy. BetterHelp, there's a couple of them. And you can literally do virtual therapy sessions. You don't even have to turn your camera on.
That's so cool.
And they're cheap compared to like in-person therapy.
Yeah,
It's
we
really
went
cool.
through insurance.
And then check this out. We know that psychedelics have been extraordinarily effective to help people with trauma.
Yeah.
Like a lot of vets, and myself included, and I'll put myself there, have been really helped and healed with psilocybin and or MDMA or ketamine or ibogaine if for addiction and stuff like that. They now have, I did a podcast with the CEO of Mind Bloom, which does ketamine-assisted therapy.
Very cool.
Extremely useful because the ketamine creates this kind of disassociated state where you get into your higher mind, your more spiritual aspect of yourself.
Yeah.
And then the therapist will help walk you through and talk you through some of the dark aspects of your personality that are really have trapped you energetically into anxiety and depression.
Over here in Pendleton, they're doing psilocybin therapy. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's good.
Yeah,
to know.
there's a special group of therapy they're bringing some of the SEALs in for.
Good. Yeah.
And they're doing breath empowerment, meditation, yoga, psilocybin.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another really interesting thing, Mel, is that there's no one thing that's right for any person. So everyone should try multiple things, but ultimately what is really important is kind of a multidimensional approach to healing. This is really similar to the multidimensional approach to growth that we take with Unbeatable Mind. Is, approach it from a physical and physiological perspective. That would be breath work, yoga, massage, somatic therapy.
Tools.
Approach it simultaneously from a mental perspective. That would be therapy. And then approach it also from an emotional and intuitive perspective. That would be like psychedelics.
Totally.
Makes
so much sense.
And you bring it, and then also from obviously the spiritual perspective, and so that's meaning, coming back to your faith or believing in a higher power, or really getting deep into really clarifying why you're on this planet and what you're going to do about it, and finding the goodness inside, right? We talk about that a lot with Unbeatable Mind. Ultimately, our view of spirituality is that every human being has this incredible worth and value and goodness, and it's our ego that obscures that. And then we get patterned and trained by society to think otherwise. So feeding the courage wolf means you focus on the goodness, and slowly the evil or the negativity will dissipate because you're not feeding it anymore. You're not giving it energy. But you've got to also then actively work to clear up the shadow and the stuff that's deeply rooted, and use, that's where somatic therapy and EMDR, eye motion desensitization and reprocessing, works at a nervous system level. So we have all these different modalities. Any SEALs are listening, please go to the SEAL Future Foundation, and they have tons of support and money. Go talk to Joey Fio over there, and they'll help you out. And they'll hook you up. So some of the modalities that I know that work really well for vets or for any adult, we've already talked about psychedelics. We've talked about EMDR and therapy, but also electrostim for the brain. So brain neurofeedback and electrostimulation really helps from TB. If you have TBI. And I don't know a single military guy or woman who doesn't have some TBI if they've been involved in shooting and blowing shit up.
Yeah.
Jumping out of airplanes, right? It's just going to happen.
Par for course.
It's par for the course. So electrostim, neurofeedback, that's at the brain level. Therapy works in the heart, and psychedelic assisted therapy works at the heart and kind of emotional, psycho-spiritual level. There's a lot of like weekend/week-long retreats now, like the Warrior Project. There's a bunch of these things. And we do them with the Courage Foundation. Yep. So they teach you integrated training, help you find purpose again, and reconnect with your higher power, so to speak.
And then there's that team essence, Mark. I think that when I think of the vets coming back, and I think how isolated they become because now their team is dispersed. Right. Maybe some are still serving.
Right. They find themselves sitting on their own couch eating
and teens and like all of the
Doritos
groups right now.
And wondering what happened.
Right. Where's their team? Where's anyone that cares? Where's anyone that understands?
Right.
Civilians do not understand what a soldier has gone and experienced. We just don't. We just never will. So in order to get that camaraderie back and that swim buddy, that necessary swim buddy who gets it, I think it's important to bring them into teams as well of people, not just the therapy, but
This is again where you kind of need help. So if you don't, it's difficult to haul yourself up by your bootstraps alone. And so it's really important, if you know somebody that's suffering, then go help them connect to a teammate, be the teammate, go connect to them, and help them plug into some of these resources that exist. And there's a lot. Just do some quick Google searches. If you're a military vet, there's tons of them. There's tons of therapy. There's tons of things that civilians can do who are suffering from, excess stress leading to anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies. There are solutions, and once you plug in and start working them, it's like a glimmer of light suddenly peeks through the shade that you've drawn across the window. And you're drawing the shade across the window of your own spirit, so let that light kind of peek out. And then once you see the light again of your spirit and you feel that glimmer of hope, then you're basically healed. It's just a matter of time and continuing to do the work. But you got to reach a hand down to help someone and pull them up sometimes,
And sometimes the hand you're reaching, the words you're using, aren't the right ones because you're not in the right setting. So
That's
you have
right.
to, with like teens and stuff now, it's like really
Well,
hard
let's shift to teens. That's a whole different
hard
thing.
to connect to, as us and our modalities and all of
Right.
our tools we have.
Right.
They've entered a world right now, particularly this group of teens have entered a world where you're basically under world catastrophe conditions.
Right. Yeah, the things like Henny, the hell in a handbasket, the world's falling apart. Chicken Little. Is it Chicken Little? The sky is falling?
The sky's falling. I mean, we had the Red Scare, right?
Right.
I mean, we're like, oh my God, the Russians are going to attack, which they could again. So I mean, we're there again, but now they've got COVID and they've got.
The point is, there's always something. There's always going to be something. It's going to seem to get worse. Kids are growing up in this constant negativity and constant crush of perfectionism, which is total bullshit, and social media, and all these TikTok scares and games, and they don't know where to turn. How do we help them? I mean, you're a mom.
Oh boy, if I had that $1 million question answered, I'd be making dough. You just love them. We just have to love them for exactly who they are.
You have to be there, though, right?
You have to show up.
That's the point. You have to be there.
Which is, to me, that's love, is to keep showing up for them. Whether they're a shit show or not. You just gotta,
right.
You gotta just stand there and experience it with them and take your heartbreak.
They just have to know that they're loved, though. Because if they don't know that they're loved, then all is lost for a teenager. I think that's
they keep searching for it in the wrong places.
Right. They're looking for surrogates to love. So self-love, as we know, is the most important and powerful, but it's hard to talk to a teenager about self-love. I think that teenagers need, we need to really have a national conversation about how to help teens, because I think suicide rates are really getting out of control. They're like 2x what they used to be.
Oh my God, in San Diego alone, there's not an available psychiatric bed in all of San Diego right now. One of my police officer friends was telling me that they have over 4 police officers in every emergency room in San Diego right now, spending at least a shift watching over a suicide attempt.
You're kidding me.
And these kids aren't even getting in beds. They're sleeping on the ER floor for their 72-hour holds. And then the psychiatrists that are on call are seeing over 40 kids a shift.
Wow.
So their shift's the weekend. So over a weekend, 40 kids are entering from a suicide attempt. These aren't even
at each hospital you're talking about.
At every single hospital in the San Diego area. It's crazy. They can't even report it. I don't even think they are reporting what's happening. And this is San Diego. I mean, we live in a pretty rad place. There's a lot of sunshine.
A lot of sunshine.
Imagine
a lot of beach,
what the other places are like, or the other resources.
Yeah, these things aren't being talked about because the news media is obsessing about politics and about war, and we should be obsessing about mental health and about creating opportunities to heal and grow our culture, regardless of who you are on the political spectrum. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together, one team, one fight. Yeah, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest did a lot of damage, didn't it? Because we just disbanded and gave up our mental health system in the United States back in the 70s.
Crazy.
And now we got nothing.
Nothing.
And that's why homelessness is through the roof and why teen suicide is going through the roof, because we don't really have a safety net for these people, and no one's talking about it. So we need nonprofits and philanthropists and business people to solve this, right? How do we solve this? The government has failed on it, like it has failed on so many other ways.
And parents, the parents have to show up. Parents have to understand to some degree what's happening and accept that, childhood is a difficult time in general.
What do you think about universal basic income and having, especially for single moms who are...
Universal-based income?
Yeah, one of the problems, again, is the way our society gets structured, and it's getting worse and worse because it's very hard to make a living as a single parent. You have to have like 2 jobs, and if you have 2 jobs, you're not there for your kid, right?
Yeah.
And this is one, people, my conservative friends would be like clubbing me over the head, but this is one of the best kind of rationales for universal basic income is like, let the mom or the dad stay home and parent. Let's give the family back its central role in our culture by providing some economic. I would love to see that do away with all the bullshit, safety net programs that waste 85 to 90% of the money and create a UBI that is maybe time-based, right? Maybe it's not forever.
That's right. I'd like to look more into that. That's interesting to me. It reminds
Kids
me.
need parents to be there, at least one.
And
not all the time, but not gone all the time, right?
Well, when we had like a real structured religious aspect to the family unit, which I think is disbanded for many people.
Yeah.
Kids
Well, that's
did
faith
better.
is another one too.
Faith.
So
And
faith
I don't,
and family.
people want to do what they want to do. If you have a faith-based family, those families do tend to be closer together. But why are we not creating families based around morality? Based around our principles. Like how do we form that up to look more like religion for those people who aren't religious, so that our kids understand these principles of life at a family level?
Yeah,
at a
I
young
say we
age.
have those discussions and even separate it from religion, because faith, you can have faith in a higher power without calling it something that's got a stuck past and it's going to
Fear.
Yeah, that's going to dredge up fear, and it's going to dredge up finger pointing, and it's not going to lead to people coming across the political spectrum together and locking arms.
Right.
So we got to change. This is why I love Ken Wilber's integral theory. We got to change the dialogue and go post-conservative, post-liberal, and have an integrated perspective on mental health for kids, for vets, for adults. And that integrated perspective would include faith as it's important for an individual, right? Rather than try to direct it. But the conversation can be had without any kind of religious overtones.
Right.
Because religion and spirituality are different things, right?
100%.
In my opinion.
It can be.
And also bring the discussion back to the importance of family. What's a family? It's a unit. It's a team. So why would we want to see a team disintegrated and not be able to even spend time together? Why does our culture
That's what it does.
literally promote fragmentation of families?
That's what it does.
Why does our culture promote unhealthy eating? Why does our culture promote, right, religion as something that shouldn't be talked about in any kind of cultural context? And I don't know what the answer is, but I tell you what, it's not certainly doesn't lead to optimal results or health. It's almost like mass culture, whoever's driving that in media, want people to be separated and broken and unhealthy because it serves them for some reason.
So the majority of the suicides that happened in the last year were vets, teens, and white people.
Wow.
And so you have to ask yourself, and you look at some of the other cultures, it's particularly the Latin American culture, right? So family-oriented. Their families live together. Big families live together, right? We experienced that in San Diego. And the mental health aspect of those communities is stronger
That's
than
true.
we have.
Yeah.
And so...
I've never thought about or looked at a demographic kind of statistics on suicide.
Yeah, I brought a few, and that's one of them. It's fascinating to me, and that's, our culture in particular is dragging everyone apart like that. So I felt fortunate for the COVID a little bit because I get to be really close with my kids, as a single mom.
Yeah, well, COVID had, like everything that happens, it has positive and negative
Right.
aspects to it, right? COVID was good for
Optimism.
me too. I enjoyed it. We went virtual as a company. I thrived in COVID, but a lot of people didn't, especially mental health professionals and
Oh, boy.
first responders and nurses and doctors. They really struggled.
And they still are.
So suicide rates are way high among those populations, especially nurses and first responders. So we got to come back into balance. I think that's our message, and there are tons of resources to do it, but the main resource is you, right? To stop, to get out of your negative rut and recognize that it's physiological at a prima facie level. Like if you have TBI or if you are suffering from a hyperarousal from being exposed to stress year after year, you're not going to be thinking well. You will be depressed, you will have anxiety, and you will start to be thinking dark thoughts just because of your physiology. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean you're not super smart. It just means your body is out of balance and your brain is out of balance. So I always say the first place to start is get your body back into balance. Start that with box breathing, a breath practice every day. Like commit to it as if your life depended on it, because it does.
It does.
And then start eating better, start exercising again, and start sleeping better. Take care of that first. Find a friend to talk to, right? So make your friend your therapist, but if they're not helpful, like I said, hire a therapist or both. Your friend is there to tell things to that you wouldn't tell your therapist, but they've got to be positive, right? So if you're with a friend group, or you've got friends who are making it worse for you and they're negative,
Right.
and they're petty, then find yourself a new friend or friend group. It's not doing you any good.
Friendships and interesting like that, because oftentimes, and you have a good friend and you bring them like your deepest problem. I'm having trouble with my husband or a wife. And then they side with you. So now all of a sudden the husband's always,
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful with your friends on that level as well. It's always good to find, a coach even.
Yeah, it could be a coach. Find a mentor or coach. I think that's an excellent point, Mel. Not all friends are mature enough or trained. Most aren't. Some can be, right? It's rare to find one who can provide that kind of objective, non-judgmental, or even non-siding. I guess it's judgmental if they're judging on your side, or if they're not objective. But a coach, and this is where I look at a therapist simply as a mental emotional coach. So think of it that way, and just go to BetterHelp or go to one of our, one of the other solutions and find that help. And then consider getting involved in some somatic work, because it's really powerful. Because these ruts get burnt into our nervous system, and you can't just talk your way out of it. That's why EMDR and somatic therapy are really valuable, and yoga, because as you move the energy. Emotion is energy in motion. As you move your body, or you get massage in your body, or you do some somatic practice like Qigong or Tai Chi, then it starts to move that stuck energy that maybe was rooted there as a childhood trauma or combat trauma. When I was in combat over in Iraq, I did yoga every day. I did box breathing, yoga, and visualization every day, and I came home feeling really good.
Yeah.
But my SEAL buddies, they get done with an op, and they were playing first-person shooter games to unwind, quote unquote. It's ridiculous.
Where's the endorphins?
Yeah, it kept them high, it kept them hyper aroused, and they did this 6 months straight. No wonder. And then combat tour after combat tour. So you gotta down-regulate your system. You do that through box breathing, through exercise, through proper nutrition, through sleep, then therapy, and then a long-term life practice of some sort of somatic integrated training, or integrated movement, integrated training, yoga, dance, time in nature, walking. These things. These things that we teach for optimal living, they work for you for mental health as well.
Yeah.
Back into balance is really what it's all about. And then find that purpose and find a team, right? And usually they go hand in hand. Because once you're clear on your purpose again, and that comes through journaling and introspective work, right? It usually will come through the box breathing practice, because then it draws you deeper inward. But then you supplement it with journaling and contemplation, asking questions. Who am I? What am I supposed to do? And the answer will come to you, because it's inside. And once you get clear on that, and then you start aligning it. Like, oh, okay, well, I'm meant to be this. And then you go figure out who in your community is doing that, and you connect with them, and then boom, now you got yourself another team and a purpose. And if you're a parent whose kid is suffering with some mental issues, just be there for them, get them a therapist. You might need some SSR type thing, but make sure that doesn't get them addicted. My stepdaughter has been, unfortunately, they got her on that early, and it's been a nightmare to get off of it.
There's a lot of herbs. There's St. John's wort. You just have to make sure you're talking to a doctor first. There's like some St. John's wort, valerian root. There's a lot of anxiolytics that will help curb some of that stuff if you can for your child as well. Before you, or if the antidepressants aren't working or whatnot. But short term on those is key.
Psychedelic therapy really helps with that. Microdosing. I know these things aren't technically legal yet. Not for kids, but not for kids. I wouldn't recommend it for kids. I mean adults.
Yeah.
There's great interventions like that.
Yep, plenty of interventions. And then just keep trying, keep
Yeah.
showing up. Get into groups yourself if you've got a team like that. Get into a team of people that understand what you're going through as well. Because you're going to feel like, it gets cyclic, right? You're going to feel like a failure. Your kid's failing, things are happening.
Is there any like national resource for parents to help with kids who are dealing with suicide?
There's like the Facebook groups and there's things like that. They have to let you in and things like that, you know, and I've heard of. So
Maybe as far as this, as part of this show notes, we can research a couple links for parents to go to. And as far as vets, go check out Courage Foundation. Feedcourage.org is our Courage Foundation, and Sid or John can help you out, can point you in the right direction. If you're a SEAL, go to the SEAL Future Foundation or the Navy SEAL Foundation. There's plenty of these organizations. Psychedelic therapy, The Mission Within, is a great one. Just, use your fingers and Siri. Fingers for Google or Siri.
Talk it out, yeah. I ask it a million things every day.
Right, and we've already talked about therapy and online therapy. Cool. Well, there's a lot of avenues for healing, but integrated healing start with rebalancing, and know that there's help out there, and know that you're not alone if you're suffering from this, or your kid is suffering, or you're a vet. But don't do what did.
Yeah.
Because that's a one-way ticket.
Reach out.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and you know of anyone who's struggling, just reach out to them. Say, man, how you doing? Right? How can I help?
When you're in that place, they'll tell you. They'll be like, I'm not so good.
Totally.
And then there it is.
There it is. Usually just expressing it, then that gives you permission to be like, okay, I got to get some help. We're taught in our society not to ask for help or to receive it. So we have to change that. Now's the time. Okay. Well, thanks for listening. I know this show probably won't appeal to everybody, but for those of you who are interested in mental health or dealing with issues in family, friends, vet community, then I hope we provided you some good information, and we'll provide some resources on the show notes. And these discussions need to be had because this is important.
I'll provide some of the links to the data I collected as well. You guys can check out.
Oh yeah, thanks for joining me, Mel.
Thank you.
And we'll do this again on other topics, maybe more positive ones or happy ones.
100%.
All right. So, folks, that's it for now. Until next time, hoo-yah. This is the Mark Divine Show. Show notes will be up at markdivine.com. Also, you can find us on Instagram at Real Mark Divine, Facebook at just Mark Divine, Twitter, Mark Divine, all that kind of stuff. LinkedIn. You reach out to us at info@Unbeatable Mind if you're interested in connecting with our training at Unbeatable Mind or SEALFit, because those are incredible ways to really up your game and to improve your mental thinking and processing. Courage Foundation, great place to get support if you're a vet, feedcourage.org. Ask for Sid. And also shout out to Jeff and Mel and Melinda and Jeff Torres and Jason Sanderson, who produced this podcast. Takes a team. It's a lot of work, believe it or not. Doesn't just happen. We had an amazing team. And thanks for being part of the solution and listening to this show and other great podcast shows and partners that we have, like Jordan Harbinger and others. It's really important to be engaging in positive dialogue, positive self-talk, sharing positive and abundant mindsets, because that's what's going to push back against the negativity and the violence in our culture. It's not going to be like pushing or fighting the violence. That's just going to foment it. It's by us scaling positivity. Mm-hmm. We're going to have 100 million or 1 billion people thinking positively, thinking about things with compassion and inclusion, and ignoring the violence. Unless it's, of course, on your doorstep, then you take care of it like sheepdog. But I'm saying we don't feed the fear wolf. We start feeding the courage wolf. And we can do that at scale. The world will change before our very eyes very quickly. That's why I'm optimistic about the future.
I'm optimistic about the future, too.
Yeah. Hoo-yah. It's going to be amazing. All right. That's it. This is the Mark Divine Show. Till next time. Hoo-yah.